Mr Speaker.
I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, Queenslanders have had enough of the crisis and chaos of this government. A government that has lurched from scandal to scandal, from blowout to blowout, from service failure to service failure. A government that believes it is their right to rule. A government that expects your vote. Well, we're going to earn it. And we're going to earn it by listening to Queenslanders across this state. And we promised reform, and we have delivered it. We promised to hold the government to account, and we continue to do so. And we promised to chart a different course, and we will continue to deliver that. And because of the chaos of this government, the crises continue to mount, and it was on display in the last week when it came to the issue of rental caps. An issue where, on Monday, the Premier said it was something that was being seriously considered. On Tuesday, the Deputy Premier doubled down and even linked it to CPI. By Wednesday, a back down from the Premier and the statement that it was a misunderstanding, it was everybody else's fault, and now today something that doesn't resemble any of the previous positions. Chaos leading to a crisis. And it is in the housing space where Queenslanders are feeling that crisis every day. 8 years of an underinvestment in infrastructure to open up new opportunities for young people to get into the market, to be able to rent, partnerships with the community housing sector, and targets being met for the social housing sector. And today we heard again about more money. You should be grateful. Here's the more money. And yet, when pressed for answers on what has been delivered, we got zero. 4 announcements that were overdue the government was questioned about, and they couldn't point to a single Queenslander housed. The Housing Investment Fund, 2 years, not a single new build. Granny Flats, zero. Griffith University, zero. The Clayfield Retirement Home, zero. All of these promises are now overdue, and yet the government doesn't feel the pain of the Queenslanders we are listening to. The Queenslanders who are caught up in another crisis, and that is the health crisis. 8 years in the making. Ambulance ramping figures that are nearly 3 times what this government inherited, that are more than 10% higher than when the former Premier Bligh described them as a basket case. Waiting times where innocent Queenslanders are caught between the cracks for vital surgery. Maternity wards being closed in cities that provide so much for this state. Scandals at Caboolture, at Mackay, the failures of the DNA lab where the opposition and whistleblowers were mocked for wanting to raise it. And just the other day, Mr Deputy Speaker, our 30th town hall. Our 30th town hall in Townsville. And we promised the people, when the member for Mudgery and I went there, we promised the people we would take their fight to this chamber today. And what did we get from those opposite? They were whingers. Because the research shows that they want to try and create some kind of narrative that it's all Queenslanders' fault, that these are things happening elsewhere. Queenslanders who bravely turned up got called whingers. Queenslanders who are falling through the cracks, who are waiting for vital surgery. Queenslanders who didn't have an AMBO turn up in their hour of need, and they got branded as whingers. And the crime crisis, Mr Deputy Speaker, where a government came into office and weakened the laws. One of the first actions of this government to weaken the laws, where the thin blue line just keeps getting a little bit thinner, and the government won't even release those figures to show just how bad it is, where the Victims of Crime Fund continues to ensure that innocent Queenslanders are denied the justice and the financial compensation they deserve, where for 2 years those opposite told us that breach of bail just wouldn't work and then adopted the LNP's policy word for word. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, that is only the start. That can only be the start if we are to truly heal the youth crime epidemic gripping this state. It is about consequences for actions, putting the rights of the victim ahead of the rights of the offender. It is about unshackling the judiciary, to make sure that detention as a last resort is removed from the Youth Justice Act, which is providing our magistrates to be shackled in their decision-making. And it is about gold standard early intervention, so we can turn kids around before they have a knife standing at your door, before they're ramming into yet another police car, before another innocent Queenslander falls through the cracks. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, those opposite just expect that this is what will happen, that they can continue to fail Queenslanders and they'll continue to have a mandate to do what they continue to do. Because for 30 of the last 35 years, at the time of the next election, those opposite will have been in power, where they have won 11 of the last 12 general elections, and they believe that that is their right, where a government will be seeking its 4th term and 14 years in office, and they expect your vote. Well, we're going to earn it. We're going to continue to earn it by working harder, by listening better and by getting across this state and showing Queenslanders what it will be like to have an economy built on the back of small and family business, to have service delivery so an AMBO turns up and isn't stuck at the end of the ramp, so there are more police and they've got the laws to do their job, so young kids can get in the housing market, so our national parks are maintained to the best standard ever, and that our educational institutions continue to provide the best opportunity for our kids and that standards are met that are best in the nation. Yeah. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, we have reflected this by getting candidates in the field earlier than ever before. Yeah. Candidates that reflect a modern Queensland, who will be fighters for their electorate. Candidates who will be asked to speak up on behalf of their communities. Yeah. And we saw it on the Green on Sunday, where 3 brave candidates stood up for their electorates. Yeah. People like Yolandi Enchin-Cairns, a humanitarian, a small business owner, dedicated her life to vulnerable Queenslanders. She spoke about the issue of crime and homelessness in her community. People like Natalie Marr in Thuringowa, a former councillor, long-term chair of Townsville Crime Stoppers volunteer, told us about what it is like in her city because of a generation of repeat young criminals. People like Rebecca Young in Redlands,
your interjections aren't being taken.
Born and bred, a Chamber of Commerce president, and she spoke about what the lack of investment in health and road infrastructure, places like the hospital, has meant for her city. They are the first of many candidates who will be out in the field earlier than Queenslanders have seen before. Yeah. We are building a team that will stand up for Queenslanders against the chaos and the crisis that those opposite have overseen. They will be candidates who will be unashamedly putting their regions and their cities first, and they will be part of generational change for this state, where Queenslanders will again be treated like customers, where they will matter in the eyes of their government, where the services will be delivered for them and where they won't be accused of being whingers if they want to speak up.
They'll be listened to.
They will be listened to, and they will have advocates who will put them first. And this government believes that it is their God-given right to be the government. They just expect it. They just expect it, because that's the way they feel it always has been and always will be. And the Education Minister just nods. We get that. The hubris, the arrogance, but in the end, the chaos and the crisis that is setting those opposite, Queenslanders have woken up to the same old scare campaigns of a government wanting 14 years in office and a 4th term at the next election.
Order, members.
Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, before I conclude my contribution, we are farewelling a long-serving journalist in this state. One might say a silky smooth operator. And we wish Marty Silk all the best in his move. Marty has been a long-term servant of Queensland in what he has done. He is leaving the Gold Coast for Sydney, and we can only say, Marty, that that's not your finest decision. But we can say we wish you all the best. We thank you for the way you have conducted yourself and best wishes with your next career move.
Deputy Speaker.